On. What's up, party people? It's your host, Sunny Ray from the Sunny Ray Show. Today I'm joined by Flo, one of the, in my view, faces of the Bitcoin and crypto scene here in Canada. I think I've ran into you, what, at least three conferences this year. So how's it going, Flo?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Happy Christmas Eve.
Happy Christmas Eve. Happy holidays to everyone listening. Here we are. We're troopers, aren't we? We're recording the day before Christmas. Nothing stops Bitcoin and nothing will stop us. So, Flo, maybe kick us off by just giving like a high level in terms of what people are gonna hear about on this episode. Just a little bit about who you are, but we're gonna do a deep dive, obviously.
Sure, my pleasure. Look, first, thanks for inviting me. Also, equally pleased to know you and to have bumped into you and to be building a relationship with you. Very admire you a lot, so I'm honored to be here, really. Look, I don't know. I would say the first thing about me is I'm the founder and CEO of Blockchain North. That's how most people will know me in Canada, certainly in the digital asset space. What most people might not know and may find out in this interview is that I'm really international. I've had several lives, way before my experience in this industry for the last 4 years. Um, yeah, and I'm very human as well. I'm very uneven, and I probably have some areas where I shine, and I'm 47, so I think I know what those are by now. But I also have some kind of like weaker spots that I'm pretty humble about. So yeah, just a guy trying to advance an industry, try to support Canada, and interestingly, someone who's not even Canadian. So that is my short summary.
Good, good. So let's kick it off. I was doing a bit of research prior to the show, and I discovered that you used to live in 13 different countries and 15 different jurisdictions. So maybe take us back a little bit. We're going to obviously touch on your Bitcoin story as I do in every episode. We're going to talk about Blockchain North and all the great work you're doing here in Canada. But before all of that, I like to, just talk a little bit about where you were before you got into Bitcoin, just so that people can relate and maybe find some of their story in yours. So tell
Sure.
us about your travels before. What were you up to before you got into Bitcoin?
My pleasure. Well, I mean, like a lot of Canadians, I'm a new Canadian, so I've been in Canada for 13 years, but I'm 47, and so I have 34 years of experience pre-Canada. And so just to kind of like summarize it, I'm born in Paris, just outside of Paris. My father is French, my mother is Dutch. So I'm born international, if you could put it this way. One of the pivotal moments in my life is when my parents separated when I was 2 years old, and my mom married an American. So my life became even more international. Although, interestingly, up until about 19 years old, I just lived in France, went in to French schools, French boarding school, things like that. So there's this kind of paradox where at home we spoke several languages, and we went on holidays to Holland, to Finland. But my stepdad is originally Finnish. But I hadn't really, explored the world much up until 19. And then at 19 years old, my mom basically gave me the option and said, you speak languages, you have Dutch, have you considered, studying abroad? And I, in my youth stupor, I hadn't really thought about it. And so I'm like, oh my God, I could go abroad, right? So I obviously picked that option, and I ended up moving to The Hague in the Netherlands. So my second country. Didn't speak the language at that time, or barely, but I went to this international school called the Hotel School The Hague, which was at the time one of the best hotel schools in the world, hotel management schools. Really excited about that. I've always been someone who likes hosting, who likes, spending time with people, kind of catering, entertaining a little bit. I kind of like to have fun, and I'd like to think I can be funny sometimes, depending on the audience. So the hotel school made a lot of sense to me at that time, and it was an international school too. So I was part of the international section. That really opened up my world, not just living away from my family at 19 years old, which is quite early, and even a few years before with boarding school. But yeah, being surrounded by people from all over, everything from German to Jordanian to everything, really, the whole world, American, British. And so from there on, I ended up staying in the Netherlands for a whole 10 years. That was already not part of the plan, but I loved the country. I made a lot of friends. Obviously, those years are very formative. Your relationships there are very important, and they still are to me. And then after 10 years, I think I was a little bit tired of Holland. It's a small, flat country, very rainy in the winter, and I just felt like I aspired to explore more. And at the time, I was working in IT, which is kind of funny because I kind of gone full circle if you consider blockchain IT. It almost sounds like an outdated word. And this friend of mine was like, "Oh, I found this interesting job. They send people all over the world to do these investment reports. Would you like to join?" And I was like, "Well, I just had a promotion," and I was like, "I don't know. It sounds like crazy." Sure enough, 3 months later, the winter hit, and I started thinking back to that conversation, and I contacted him, and they were hiring, and so I flew to Madrid for this kind of week-long, what they called selection training. And the idea was indeed that they were sending people to all over the world, mostly in what you would call the global south, to produce investment reports on the country, on industries, etc. And my first project was Indonesia. And this was great because I just spent 10 years in the Netherlands. And so I had Indonesian friends. I knew Indo cuisine, and I'd always wanted to go there. And so just to fast forward a little bit, because like you said, it's quite a few countries. The next 4.5 years, it was Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, Zambia, Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya, Azerbaijan, Thailand, Maldives. And then my dad got sick, and I thought, okay, this is maybe the time to move back to Europe. And this company contacted me and said, hey, we're looking for experienced project managers. We're doing a project in Gibraltar. Would you be interested? And I thought, well, that's perfect because it's in Europe. It's an hour and a half flight from Paris. I could come and take care of my dad. And so I took that project, and the guy was Canadian, by the way. And so then my dad got better, and the guy was like, "Well, would you like to do another project? And what would you think of Canada?" You know, and I was like, "Wow." At that point, I'd only been to the U.S. once. I'd spent a lot of time, like I said, in emerging markets in the South, but Canada, that was a big, fascinating country I knew very little about. And I was like, "What's the project?" And he's like, "Oil sands, Alberta, Calgary." I was like, "Oh my God, I know nothing about that area." I had lived in Saudi, Indonesia, Kenya, so I knew about oil and gas and energy and all those kind of considerations. And that was the start of my journey in Canada. And now I've been here for 13 years. So first Alberta, then BC, back to Alberta, back to BC, and now for 8 years in beautiful Montreal. Yeah, so that's my, I guess, my geographic journey, if you will.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Hey, I gotta ask you a question. So, what kind of common threads did you notice in how different cultures perceive money? I'm
Oof,
just curious. And is
wow,
it something you thought
huge
about?
question.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, I mean, you got a unique perspective, so I thought I'd ask.
Yeah. Um, oh my
Hey,
God. I
Flo,
don't
one
know.
quick
Like,
question. Do you
uh,
have a hard stop at the 10:30 mark, or can
no,
you go a bit
no, no,
longer?
no,
Okay,
no,
cool,
no,
cool.
no.
I feel like
It's
we're,
semi-holiday.
yeah, it'd be nice to
Yeah,
go a little
we're
bit
in for a long
longer.
conversation.
Cool, cool.
No, no, you guide me and you interrupt me anytime, please. Um, Look, I mean, in preparation, I didn't really do a lot of homework, but in thinking about this interview, I did think about one little story that I've run into a number of times, which is, my company, sorry, the company I was working for, and the company that sent me all over the world was based in Madrid, and the projects were in places like Indonesia, for example. And at the time, one thing that I remember is how we received money to run our projects. And I mean, we were staying in like hotels. We had a driver because we knew nothing about the city, and we had to get to all these places for meetings. And we were living. It's funny to think back on that time. I was living pretty comfortably. That was also part of the appeal, being an expat. And of course, it was also adventure, so it was both. Um, but I just remember in Indonesia they sent us to HSBC to collect cash, and we were talking like $10,000 in cash. And that was my first project. And so I was like a trainee. And so I had to do these kind of errands. And so I just remember having to go to HSBC and show my ID and whatever and collect $10,000 in cash. And I was so impressed by that in my mid 20s that I one day I laid the $10,000 on my bed, in cash, just to see what it represented. I must have a photo somewhere. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think this is 2008. So this is, now I guess almost 2 decades ago. And how far we've come along with money. And the other little story, and it doesn't really answer your question, but it is about money, is a few years later I was in Kenya, and Kenya is where M-Pesa, which was a project by Vodafone and the Kenyan entity called Safaricom, they had pioneered M-Pesa, and M was money, and Pesa, sorry, M was mobile, and Pesa meant money in Swahili. And so that had just come out. And so when I did my project, I interviewed the CEO of Safaricom. And of course, I had no idea that crypto, blockchain, Bitcoin was going to be such a big part of my life not that long later, right? But yeah, anyway, so I don't know. These two little anecdotes come to mind when I think
No, I
about
think
things.
M-Pesa is a great example. I mean, it might be the first example of like a digital currency reaching some sort of escape velocity, at least within, that region, right? I mean, I'd been
I think
hearing
so.
about M-Pesa for a very long time, and yeah, it kind of laid the groundwork for what's to come. There's a company called I think BitPesa out of Africa.
Okay. Okay.
I know they had done some amazing work in trying to kind of reconcile the new world we're going to talk about with Bitcoin and everything with the old one. So let's
Yeah.
maybe shift gears. I'm really curious to know. So, by the way, I was born in Edmonton, Alberta, so I've got
Okay.
a ton of experience in the oil sands as well. But gotta admit, I'm quite happy that I found my way to Bitcoin and crypto and
Same.
robotics and all this stuff. But tell us about your Bitcoin journey. Like, when's the first time you came across it? Was it like a moment? Was it a process? How did you have your like aha moment? The skies parting, angels singing.
Yeah, it was progressive for sure. It was not really one thing. It was several. I've been asked this a few times, so I do have my little story. I mean, I'd heard about Bitcoin like most people fairly early on, but completely dismissed it. I do remember in Paris there was a restaurant or maybe a bar that famously accepted Bitcoin, and it ended up in the news a few times. And this is maybe like I don't know early 2010s, and I just completely dismissed it, ignored it. It seemed so small and irrelevant. But a little bit later, so what brought me to Canada was this Canadian guy I mentioned who hired me for Gibraltar and then sent me to Alberta. And we were doing these physical investment reports very late, actually. I mean, we basically should have transitioned digital way earlier. But eventually, we decided to create a website. Finally, this is like 2016 or 17, and now we were doing interviews like I do now for Blockchain North, but for a new website that we called the futureeconomy.ca, which still exists and still does a lot of interviews. And the sole focus was where is Canada going? How can we, improve? How can we be more competitive, et cetera, et cetera. And that was an incredible journey. I interviewed, I think it's over 1,500 leaders in every industry in Canada, universities, indigenous, environment. I interviewed Bill Morneau at the time when he was Minister of Finance. So I really, have this very wide kind of, I guess, understanding of the economy and of all these issues. And so three people that I interviewed led me towards blockchain. I don't remember exactly in what order, but I'm going to say Don Tapscott was certainly one of the first ones. For those who don't know and are watching, that's the founder and CEO of the Blockchain Research Institute and the also author of Blockchain Revolution, amongst others, which is a great way to start blockchain. And then and he, at the time he had a TED Talk as well, which went I think generated millions of views, and he really helped me connect the dots. So that was one. Another one, which is much more surprising, maybe was Jim Harris. And Jim Harris had been the head or the leader of the Green Party of Canada for I think several years, and eventually reconverted himself as a what he called disruptive innovation keynote speaker. And so he was traveling around the world talking about things like robotics that I know you're big into, EVs and AI, of course, and blockchain. And so he also kind of nudged me in the direction of blockchain. And then the third one, which is a bit more recent, and who I bumped into in Toronto recently, is Sam Seif, founder and CEO of Purpose Invest. I think it's the second issuer of a spot crypto ETF in the world after 3iQ around 2021, I believe. And yeah, so those three interviews, I mean, I guess it started clicking. And then having worked for 9 years on the previous business, that was that Canadian guy Tim's business, I decided to move on. I decided I wanted to create my own business. And so, that's when I'll get to it. But, I started thinking maybe I do something around crypto and digital assets.
Fascinating. And so you mentioned something interesting. You said your previous career and focus was more around like analyzing and studying and reporting on the future of Canada. So when
Yeah.
you think about the future of Canada today and in relationship to Bitcoin and what's happening dare I say, south of the border, right? Our big brother and what's all the
Yeah.
crazy positive developments and really around the world. What's your take on that now? Like where do you see Canada in the mix of all this? Are we falling behind? Are we ahead of the
Oh my God.
curve? But just very curious to hear your thoughts.
I mean, I think you know the answer to that question, but the word that came to my mind when you started asking the question very strongly is missed opportunity. Uh,
Mm.
the other one is potential, but I'll be honest, 13 years in Canada, I'm a little bit tired of hearing about potential. I just feel like we're just constantly missing the boat. So again, back to my oil and gas time, I mean, Canada should be the global leader in the oil and gas industry. I'm not saying that we don't have to transition. I believe in climate change and I believe that we need new solutions, but I also know that these things take a long time. And I also think that if I'm going to get oil from somewhere, or if the world should get oil from somewhere, I think Canada should certainly be one of the top, producers, ethically, environmentally, socially, etc. So yeah, it was a lot of frustration in my time in the oil and gas industry, just seeing that potential not being realized and seeing Canada's destiny kind of being defined outside of the industry and often even outside of the country. And so it's interesting because I see a parallel with the digital asset space. I did a talk at Futurist recently where I talk about how innovation, simply moves to where it's welcome, and Canada, or Quebec to be more specific, putting a moratorium on Bitcoin mining several years ago and Canada just not embracing and our leaders never really talking about blockchain, which is I think where it starts, just having the government recognize blockchain's a real industry, it's serious, it's huge, it's a huge opportunity for Canada. So yeah, for me that's a bit of a frustrating spot, I have to be honest. I mean, I think Canada has the natural resources, Canada has the stranded assets. Canada is a very connected country in the world, actually. That's one of our greatest strengths. And so for many reasons like these, I think, and you mentioned south of the border. I mean, the concern about our digital assets being mostly custodied outside of Canada, that's another concern. I mean, all this is stuff that could be very proactively managed in Canada and would give us a huge competitive edge. But unfortunately, it's not the way the story is being written right now. So.
Someone recently said that if we would have embraced Ethereum, it might have been the biggest company that Canada had ever produced.
That's Alex
Um,
Tapscott. Yeah, I mentioned that in my talk. Yeah.
oh, you did? Okay,
Yeah, he's
interesting.
well, I mean it's him, but I
I got
just told
it.
that story. I think his line is Ethereum is the greatest business venture, Canadian business venture of all time. And he says like people often talk about RIM or BlackBerry, but I mean look at where it got. Let's see where Shopify goes, but we're comparing a platform technology with standalone companies, so it's not even comparable. He compares it to the Avro Arrow, I think it's called. I'm not born in Canada, so I don't remember that, but like a major sort of invention that comes from Canada.
Do you know what Toronto means?
Mm-mm. No.
I think if I, but hopefully the internet can fact check me, but it means the meeting place.
Oh,
Yeah. So I was gonna say is that by the way, I was fortunate enough to have a front row seat to seeing Vitalik, put together Ethereum.
wow.
What a marvel. Not to mention where was AI born? AI was born at University of Toronto, right? So
Yeah.
you've got the natural resources, like you said. You've got the neighboring country to the largest economy in the world. You've got this huge landmass, but in my view, most importantly, you've got an education system, engineering schools that are producing top-notch engineers that, the valley tends to benefit the most out of. And so, yeah, I mean, I've felt always the same way, Flo, is that we have this tremendous potential that's even to some extent been realized, but we have a
Mhm.
really hard time commercializing and seeing it through to kind of the end, right? As soon as something gets a bit too big, we seem to freeze up. So I know we got a little
Yeah.
bit of time left, but I want to spend some time on the project that you've been now dedicating the last few years towards. I mean, I just love your energy. Every time I go to a Bitcoin event, I see you interviewing people nonstop, and I'm just like, man, this Flow guy, he's really passionate. So, gotta say, your evangelism is contagious. But tell us a little bit about what your mission is there, what you guys are up to, and I know you're working with like the top people like Jamie Leverton, and you just mentioned the Tap Scots, and yeah. So tell us a little bit about Blockchain North.
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, the origin story first. So we talked a bit about Bitcoin, and I'm glad you mentioned Ethereum, because of course that's a huge part of Canada's blockchain story, perhaps the biggest piece. Um, so 4 years ago, when I left the previous company I was co-heading, let's say, to create my own company, the first business I created was a digital marketing company because that's essentially what where my strengths lied, and having a huge network from all the interviews I'd done before and all the events and all that stuff made it relatively easy to get it off the ground. But that same year, I think it was January 2021, I finally decided to buy some Bitcoin and some Ethereum. I think I put $500 in each. And I sort of thought at that moment, I'll just put it there and I'll forget it. But the opposite happened. I started looking every day at the price, and then I started going on crypto Twitter. And I realized two things. I realized one, Canada is a pioneer of the blockchain space. I always say a pioneer. I just want to put things in context and be a bit humble, but certainly we're one of them. Um, and two, very little narrative, very little storytelling, very little sort of advocacy, on behalf of Canada to Canadians to inform, to educate Canadians through a Canadian lens, which I think is really important because we are a vast and broad country, and like people in Alberta versus Quebec. I mean, these are different, very different worlds. And then, of course, also ultimately to give Canada a voice globally. And so that was a paradox to me. I was like, how can we be global pioneers and just not have stories told from our voice and anyone to spotlight our industries? And now, at this point, I always have to say huge kudos to Colea Carrington and the Canadian Blockchain Consortium, Bitcoin Consortium since last October. I've actually known Colea pretty much since the first year I moved to Canada, so 13 years. So before we were both in this space, which is quite fun. But yeah, and there are others. I mean, the Canadian Web3 Council, which is one of our clients on the marketing side for a few years already. So shout out to her and people like Futurist. And I mean, there are a lot of people, but there wasn't a national media type pan-Canadian institution, like you said, doing interviews, keeping social media alive on a almost daily basis. And so I just decided to create it. I mean, I was just like, I'd come from a new media kind of a bit artisanal, I'll be honest, background. I don't have this kind of like Globe and Mail or CNBC experience at all. Never have. But that maybe is an advantage because, maybe if you have too much experience, it's too daunting and you don't even try, right? So I just created a Twitter account. I called it Crypto News Canada. And basically anything I read, I would share and comment and ask questions. And I grew it relatively quickly. And then eventually we decided to rebrand. This was, the year of Terra Luna and Voyager and FTX and all that. And the term crypto was maybe not favorable. And we decided to call it Blockchain North. And we've had a number of breaks along the way. I mean, I do have to shout out Kolea, as I said, to for inviting us to her events and letting us put up a little banner and interview people at her event, even though we were just getting started. Another big one would be the Futurist crew, and in particular, Tracy Leparulo and Mayor Akbari, who likewise invited us right away, very quickly give us like a media booth and all that, which we've been doing now at every Futurist since. Yeah, and there are many other people that I should thank, our sponsors and early partners. Morali, who's our founding sponsor for the last 3 years, guy from Toronto, who yeah, without who we wouldn't be here. But yeah, so that's the story of Blockchain North initially.
And Flo, you've interviewed, I think, if I'm not mistaken, well over 200 people, right?
300 now.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Yeah, if
Okay.
you include spaces. Yeah.
That is amazing. So what's one of the recurring themes that, keeps coming up regarding the next 3 years? Like, are you
Yeah, of
finding some patterns there in terms of
course.
what the leaders are talking about in Canada?
Yeah, of course. That was, in fact, the title of my presentation at Futurist, which was called Insights from 200 Crypto CEOs. And then we realized, oh shit, we didn't count all the spaces guests that we've had. So it's actually 300, but it doesn't matter. Um, Look, if there was only one, and like I said, my journey in this space started 4 years ago. So I kind of missed, I guess, the what you could call the heydays or the 2017, ICO year and all these kind of, kind of the wild west of crypto, let's say. So what I'm hearing now basically is a few things. is digital assets, crypto, blockchain, Bitcoin, are obviously completely here to stay. They're now, especially since this year, really being integrated into the, kind of the mainstream financial system for better or worse. I mean, I'm sure some people in some spaces will be like, regretting that side of things, but I think it's just a reality that it's here to stay. The other one is that the progress is probably slowing down because it's now becoming part of something much bigger and complex. And so I don't think we're going to see a revolution over the next 6 months or the next year or the next two or maybe even the next five. I think it's actually going to be now, kind of a slower burn integration into, the existing systems. At least these are the kind of things that I've been hearing. Again, for better or worse, I can't be the judge of it. Um, the other big one is the thing about innovation. It's just, that innovation just goes where it's welcome. And the US has been an incredible story under Trump 2.0, as I call him. Not, particularly supportive of the character, but certainly for our industry. I mean, it's obviously paying. We are in Canada have lost a lot of people just this year, to the United States. And that's because he talks about it, because he supports it, because he appoints people that are leading the space because he's personally invested, which is kind of wild. And Canada is so far from that, so innovation goes where it's welcome, and if we want it to happen here, we're going to have to do certain things differently. So these are two maybe big themes.
And what's the biggest challenge, Flo, that you've been facing in, keeping that Canadian narrative alive when so much of this capital has moved to the US or the UAE
Mm.
and abroad? Yeah, what have you noticed as like a challenge and kind of get that message across to Canadians?
Just what you said, I think, is the fact that, yeah, I mean, it's not only capital and of course IP and talent that's moving. It's attention. It's the attention. I heard someone tell me recently, and I won't quote, but it came from an exchange. Our challenge is we're always looking for support. Basically, we need the Canadian industry to support us. We can't do this on our own. And support is usually means dollars. Usually means sponsorship for initiatives that we put forward. And we've had some successes, but I think we could have probably received a lot more support to this point. Um, the answer I got from a CTP once was like, "Oh yeah, it's good that you're doing all this in Canada, and yes, we want to raise awareness about crypto in Canada and so on and so forth, but we figured that our money is better spent in the United States trying to advocate for change in the US because in the end, Canada will follow." You know? Which I thought I just find that so sad. I just I that we are almost so resigned that advocating in Canada is almost useless. I mean, I disagree, and I'm sure Kolea would disagree, and a number of others, but at least that's one narrative, right? So the other thing, of course, is that Canada is a small market. I mean, we don't. Our message isn't we're just here to cover what's happening in Canada for Canadians, and that's it. I'm an international guy, as I explained earlier, and I've always thought, we need to, like I said earlier, give Canada a voice in Canada, but then also globally, and we need to create bridges, and we need to connect Canada basically globally. So this year, 2025, we've attended and partnered with our first three international events, which, for a bootstrapped startup, you could still say like we are, that's a pretty big deal. We were invited to the Avalanche Summit in London in May, which was epic. We were also invited, so again, people reached out to us by Boston Blockchain Week. Great event, really loved it. Got to listen to, and unfortunately not interview, but the CEO and chair of Fidelity. So that was a pretty big deal. And then more recently, Futurist Miami.
Abigail?
Yes, Abigail Johnson. Yeah.
Whoa,
Yeah,
you
she
met
was
her?
speaking there. I didn't get to interview her again. I tried, but I didn't get that
Wow.
to interview
But
her.
you
But
you were in the
Fidelity
same
is
room
based
as
in
her?
Boston. So yeah, yeah,
You
yeah, for sure. Small room too, like maybe 100 people. Um,
That is crazy. That is crazy. I actually just I posted something yesterday about Fidelity prediction that went like super viral. It
oh
got like
nice.
yeah, like 350,000 impressions on Reddit.
Oh my God.
But yeah, but no, it was just like essentially about one of Fidelity people's predictions of how Bitcoin might go to $1 billion, blah blah blah. But I think
Wow.
So maybe help me land this plane. Tell me 1 year from now, Flo, we're doing another interview. Um, what does a win look like? What will have had to have happened over the next 12 months for you to look back and say, yeah, like Blockchain Canada crushed it. We crushed it.
Yeah. Well, look, first of all, something I didn't mention that you know, but perhaps audiences don't know is Blockchain North is actually two companies in one. So there's Blockchain North, the media company. And just to be very clear, because sometimes people look at me and say, "You mean marketing?" And I'm like, "No, I mean media." We're basically building a media brand, a media company, and sometimes I joke, a media empire. Like we're building a media company. We are still small, but we are very prolific, as you mentioned earlier. 20 event partnerships in the last 3 months. That's going to slow down a little bit because that was a little too hectic. But a lot of event partnerships in Canada and globally. More and more so. We're going to be at Cayman Crypto Week in a month and a half, which is very exciting in February, and our fourth international collaboration. We produce our own content. We do a lot of interviews. We have a newsletter where we do an X space every Thursday at noon, except during the holidays. So we're very, very active. We're perhaps a little bit too spread a little bit too thinly according to, certain sort of business best practices, but this is how we've done it. And I do think it gives us a certain wingspan, that people see that we do a lot of things basically. But then we also have our marketing business, and our marketing business is called BN Creatives, just rebranded a couple of months ago. BN, of course, stands for Blockchain North. After keeping those two very separate, we've decided, on the contrary, to sort of make clearer to our audience, to our network, that we have the media arm, and then there is a division that can service our clients, which we've been doing for several years already. And so we're kind of we're a very crafty, digital marketing, copywriting, video production. We write white papers, for example. Bobby on my team has written 20, right? We've helped a lot of startups go to market, things like that. So that's really been the engine of Blockchain North, to be completely honest. That has been what has funded the growth of Blockchain North, which is still, kind of a little bit choppy, obviously. Building in crypto is hard. Building a media company in crypto is maybe even harder. In a year from now, yeah. Sorry, did you want to ask something?
No, no, go ahead. Please finish it.
In a year from now, I would say stabilization. Like I said, 2026 has been disappointing, has been choppy. Like I said, we are maybe spread a little bit thinly. We are a team of six full time with a few additional contractors running two fairly distinct companies, even though there is a synergy and flywheel and a lot of overlap. Um, so I don't know. I have a revenue figure in my head, and I want to get to that revenue figure because I know that will allow us, more flexibility, less, more, a bit more long-term thinking, lower time preference, which is obviously very important. We're still pretty, I don't want to say month to month, but we're definitely quarter to quarter, right? So thinking a year out is a little bit difficult in those conditions. Um, One of the things I'm the proudest of this year is my team. Like my team is really, I have some, like most people know only me and tend to credit me for a lot, and I'll take it. But there's five other, stars that are really fundamental really to the business, and so now the team is very strong, the strongest it's been. I want us to be, more steady. I want the revenue to get to that milestone, stay there month after month after month, so we can start planning out further. So I hope within less than a year we will be there.
I gotta ask one question. We talked a little bit about how obviously Canada has had a big hand in the crypto movement, given Vitalik's presence here. We talked about Kolea and how she's
Mhm.
recently kind of like pivoted her, organization to embracing Bitcoin, right? More than blockchain. We talked about Tap Scots and, kind of their famous book as well. One thing that a lot of people know I'm a bit of a Bitcoin maxi, even though I run a crypto exchange. I love everyone. But I gotta ask you, so have you guys, you pivoted from crypto to blockchain due to the FTX and all that, but I wonder, where does Bitcoin sit in all of this? Like Bitcoin is the $2 trillion pink elephant. It's the one that yesterday Trump bought, for their whatever, their fund or whatever you want to call it, media company, and it's the one that could be the reserve asset. It's hitting escape velocity. It's the one that grabs all the headlines. So I'm just curious, now that you're doing this BN thing, is there a chance that that B might stand for Bitcoin at one point?
That's interesting.
It's a bit
I've
of an
definitely thought
uncomfortable
about it.
question, but I gotta ask.
No, not at all. No, honestly, not at all. I'm so clear on that. No issue. So I'm personally Bitcoin first, no question about it. Look, we supported and partnered with the Canadian Bitcoin Conference 2 years in a row. It was on your podcast that I listened to it yesterday with Daniel Carlin that I heard that it's moving to Toronto, and I was like, oh
Yeah.
darn it. I mean, it's
Oh,
great. No,
sorry.
it's
I
great. But I'm
cheered because
I'm a
I'm in Toronto.
Montrealer.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
No, by
No,
the
no,
way, it was
no.
an amazing event. I loved it. The one in
Yeah, it
Montreal.
was amazing.
It
I
was
mean, my
fun.
God. Yeah, yeah. The greatest number of I would say influencers in Canada end up, at those conferences. That for us is interesting from a media point of view. Other maybe than Futurist, but Futurist is a lot bigger. Um, so look, I'm Bitcoin first. I would say my team is Bitcoin first. Certainly my number two, Bobby, I know is very much Bitcoin first, borderline maxi. Um, and look, like you said, Bitcoin is I like the pink elephant, I think you said, in the room. So if you look at our content, Bitcoin is prevalent, is dominant, is recurring. And we do not really talk about other crypto projects very specifically at all. Ethereum might be the only one, but we never talk about XRP other than in passing or something. But we've never done a space focused on XRP, an interview. We might have we done it maybe one guy because he was just an XRP maxi type of thing, but really we don't. It's not a channel that we focus on. Like we're going to talk a lot about all these random projects, and we've talked a little bit about NFTs. It's interesting. There's some nice people. For me, it's also a lot about the people. Um, but really, Bitcoin is central. So to your question, I've thought about it. I've obviously thought about it recently when Kolea rebranded because the CBC, the Canadian Bitcoin Consortium, has been an ally for years, and I mean, yeah, I don't know. What do you think we should? What would we gain from it? I guess that from as an entrepreneur, I need to know like how would that help us grow the business from your point of view?
I personally believe all roads lead to Bitcoin. Like I said, I run a crypto exchange, India's first
Yeah.
exchange. Yet our
But not a
mission
Bitcoin
is
only exchange. You're like you could have like
no,
a
no, it's not a
Bitcoin well, for
Bitcoin.
example.
Yeah, it's not a Bitcoin only exchange. Yeah, it could be a Bitcoin well, but our mission is bring Bitcoin to billions. And I've been pretty public about my stance. I see crypto as a onboarding tool for Bitcoin. The
Okay.
number hundreds of people that I've met that said, "Oh, I got into Doge," and then finally it took me a year or two to figure out that Bitcoin was the way, or, "Oh, I got started with Ethereum or fill in the blank XRP," but then finally I learned that Bitcoin was the way. So I feel like, I'm not going to judge and where people come in from different paths. And so I embrace crypto. Like I said, I run an exchange, but I also strongly believe that all roads, lead to Bitcoin. And so, yeah, I would definitely encourage you if you are considering it. I'll support you in any way I can. Like I said, I love Bitcoin, and I
Yeah, me
remember, I
too.
remember, I remember Don and Alex maybe back in 20, I don't know, 15, 16, invited me to like a closed door meeting at the top of some fancy building in downtown Toronto, and there was like 100 bankers in the room, and I put up my hand. And I told Don in front of everyone, I was like, Don, Bitcoin, not blockchain, and that now think if it's uncomfortable today, think of how uncomfortable it was back then. And I still today
Yeah.
stand by that the word blockchain is a bit made up, as in it doesn't show up in the white paper, not as like
Okay.
one word at least. And for the longest time, I felt like the banks would use the word blockchain as like a cover, as in like, oh, we get it's blockchain, not Bitcoin, blockchain, not Bitcoin. But I've can't help but feel that there is a strong now narrative shift where it's like, oh, it's Bitcoin, type of thing, right? Like they're all going to be offering Bitcoin services and Bitcoin lending and Bitcoin this and Bitcoin that. Bitcoin's a reserve
Yeah.
asset. Bitcoin's nation state, Bitcoin MicroStrategy, Bitcoin. So definitely a Bitcoin believer, but at the same time, I always say if there's one thing I believe in more than Bitcoin, it's freedom and people's ability to
Mm.
choose. And
Yeah.
And it's who knows, maybe something else emerges that dwarfs Bitcoin, but in my view, I don't see that happening soon. But I'd
No,
be I'd be
no, no.
delighted to have be wrong on it. But Flo, man, I just in general, though, I mean, the last few events I did see you at, it was the Calgary Bitcoin event, it was the Canadian Bitcoin conference in Montreal. So you
Yes.
are, in my view, the flag bearer. You're carrying the torch for a lot of us, and having done a little bit of this media and social stuff, I know it's not easy to put your face out there, your name out there. There's a lot of, kind of flack that you have to take. You expose yourself to hackers, and on and on. There's like, it's just a risk. So the fact that you're going out there every day, grinding, hustling, going to all these conferences, interviewing people, putting a spotlight on others is, I think, yeah, the world of you. And so I'm so grateful that you were able to
Thank you.
make some time on such an important day to, yeah, talk to my audience. So thank you so.
Christmas Eve. Yeah, exactly. What
It,
else is it the eve of today? It could be the eve of so many things, right?
Yeah, so where do you
Uh,
want how do you want to close this out? Do you want to maybe share the website, your Twitter handle, like where people can just like dig in and learn more about you?
Sure. Like, look, first of all, thanks so much. I mean, these words, that may to some be like, oh, it's just a few words or whatever, mean the world to me and to my team. Like we do receive a lot of support, but like I said, it is also very hard, and sometimes we feel like we don't receive the kind of material support we need. So that encouragement means a lot. We do feel recognized. I did a post a week ago, which was along the lines of that I realized this year the difference between reach and authority or being taken seriously, right? It's great to get a lot of views. Everybody chases views and followers, but more importantly, even is impact basically, and being taken seriously and having achieved a little degree of authority. Together with our team and with our all of our activities and all that, our partnerships, that's a bigger win, right? Because I think that leads to more views, more impact, on a bigger scale. But thanks a lot for saying that. I appreciate that a lot. Um, Look, we're very easy to find. I mean, just look up Blockchain North, blockchainnorth.ca, blockchainnorth.ca/newsletter to sign up to our weekly newsletter. We're going to take a hiatus for the next 2 weeks. The team needs a good rest, and everybody's more or less off the next weeks.
Are you on
Uh,
Twitter, or
of
do you
course, we are.
tweet?
We are Blockchain
No,
North with
no, no, no.
N.
Blockchain North for sure. But are
Oh,
you
myself,
personally?
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
future
couldn't
flow
find
without
it.
the E in the middle.
Future Flaw. Okay,
Future, yeah, future flow,
got it.
FUTURFLO. Yeah, I'm very active on X actually, but I,
Awesome.
I have to say the algos have been really difficult lately. So I'm now unashamed to say that I'm a LinkedIn
Yeah, you're
maxi.
crushing it. Every morning I wake up and I see your post is always at the top of my feed. And you've been kind enough to give me a couple of pointers as well. And so,
Yeah,
yeah, you're great, Flo. So thank you so much, and love
so
to have
much.
you back on in the new year. And if any of your team members want to share their story, I'd be happy to have them here as well. Yeah?
I would love that if they'd allow it. I would love that. I will send them your
Awesome.
invite. But thanks again so much,
Awesome.
and Merry
Merry
Christmas, Happy
Christmas. Happy
Holidays.
holidays, buddy. Take care. Cheers. Have a good one.
Cheers.